All right, here's the first lesson for our unit on Greece. So, the Bellwork questions I had you answer leading into this, the first one was, could America ever just disappear? And in this case, I'm talking about physically, like we're just completely gone, no record of us ever existing afterwards, or knowledge of who we are after our disappearance in a relatively short time, like a month or so. The second question was based off of, was this idea where, are there any stories that you hear that you think will still be told 50 years from now? Like, is there anything going on right now and in the world around you today that where those stories will still be talked about and part of a rumor mill or anything like that 50 years from now? So now the reasoning for these two questions. Well, first, could America ever just disappear? We have a nice discussion in class with this one, but when it comes down to it, it is really hard to think of how we could really just be gone and not no one know about us even 1,000 years ago, or even 1,000 years from now. It'd be very hard to think of it that way. But I ask this because just in thinking about ourselves in that way, in talking about the two early Greek civilizations, we're going to get into talking about the Minoans and the Mycenaeans. Well, they both disappear. The Minoans rather abruptly, and the Mycenaeans over the course of time. So it's just a way to kind of make those comparisons there, and we'll talk about that when we get there. The other question, and the idea of like, well, are there any stories that you hear now that you think can be told 50 years from now? Well, that's just the idea. If there are stories that you think will be told, that are told now, and they will be told later on, like 50 years from now, or maybe 1,000 years from now, or 3,000 years from now, well, why? Why would that story hold so much weight that it'd still be talked about much further on? And the simple answer to that one is, as well, usually those stories hold some sort of moral to them. We always use the phrase moral of the story, or the theme of the story, or the reason why the story is important is because. Those are usually the stories that last with us. And we have a lot of stories like that from ancient Greece, tons of them. Both, you could say, real stories, things that actually did happen. Then we have a lot of mythological stories that are with us, where we still continue to tell these stories, like the Hercules story, that show a lot of things that we'd like to see in ourselves, both on an individual level and as like the idea of like a societal level. Those are the stories that last, or we actually want to last because we see value in them. There's a moral to them that is a good moral to have. Or is the idea of telling even bad stuff that happens, like, well, we don't want this to happen to you, so that's why we continue to tell the story. So, that being said, those are the two opening questions, and to also explain why I did explain why we talk about that second question is, well, heck, we have a ton of stuff in our society from ancient Greece, and there's a lot of things they talked about that we still try to continue. So, that being said, I'm going to show a bunch of pictures in this point, and I usually have more of a discussion in class with this, but things that really connect us with the ancient Greeks. I did this with the Mesopotamians. I did this with the Egyptians and the Chinese. The lessons we've already gone through so far. But there's a little bit more of a direct connection, you could say, between the Greeks and us, because we purposely try to copy them in many ways. There are many ways that we don't try to copy them. We may talk about that later. Won't get too much into it. But there are a lot of ways we do try to copy them. So, just first thing first. If you're not understanding what you're seeing here, no, electric drills were not part of ancient Greece. But the drill bit, the concept behind the drill bit, or the Archimedes screw is. That's a concept the ancient Greeks, so the ancient inventor Archimedes came up with, that allowed for better drilling for water, to basically drill for wells. Essentially, you can dig down further because you're bringing the stuff out while you're digging down, and we've basically modified and used that in many different ways to improve our society today. Heck, the hand drill. Okay. If you don't recognize this as the United States Senate, basically a government, United States government. And the overall idea that, yes, we are, the more specific way you can say our government style is a constitutional democratic republic, but it is based in the concept of democracy, where the people overall have the power. In fact, democracy, the Greek term, demos kratos, demos means people, kratos means power. So put those together, demos kratos, democracy means people power, or power to the people. And we've discussed this before, that power is essentially is anything you can do or choices you can make where there isn't someone or something else saying, no, you can't. I want to fly. Well, gravity says you can't. I don't have the power to fly. Well, I came up with the jet engine. Anyways, that is power. So, being able to make choices that you wouldn't otherwise be able to make, or feel like you have the power to do things. And when it comes to government, democracy, the power to the people, not the idea of the king, monarchy, another Greek term. We like that. That explains our society a lot. When we look back to ancient Greece and see how they dealt with it. The funny thing is when we actually talk about it, there's many elements. Well, democracy doesn't go that well for especially ancient Athens after a little bit. Even though we love that idea and we adopt it into our society today, we realize that we need to do things a little bit differently than the ancient Greeks did with the original form of democracy. Anyways, we'll go more over that later, but this concept of the people have the overall power in society is a Greek idea that we play off of. Or I should say play off of, but we build off of. Now, yes, that's the Wizard of Oz, but in this case what I'm showing off here is that we don't even have our forms of entertainment today, our storytelling. It's based off of Greek plays, the idea of what a comedy is, what a drama is. These are Greek terms. So basically movies we watch, plays we watch, books we read, video games we play. I wonder what they would really be like, or how we would have those in society without the original Greek plays and Greek theater. Now, if you saw that little thing up at the top, basically, if you like your algebra and geometry classes, you thank the Greeks. If you don't like your algebra and geometry classes, well, they had to take those same classes, and we actually use that same math. Well, it's been around for thousands of years, since the ancient Greeks. Those are not new classes, you could say. Calculus, that's more of a new class. Rocket science, definitely more of a new class. But geometry, algebra, that's been around for a while, and we get that from the Greeks. Now this one, you see the athlete. If you don't know who that is, Usain Bolt, fastest man in the world, at least at the moment I'm filming this. But more so what I'm showing here is the concept of the Olympics. That is an idea that we have resurrected today, not just as, say, in the United States, but the whole world resurrected this. And the idea was, well, maybe we can use the Olympics to get the same outcome that the Greeks did, at least for a little bit. Because the Greeks, when they were at war, different city-states were at war with each other, they would stop everything when it came time for the Olympics, and they would go do the Olympics. We like that idea. And back in the late 1800s, they resurrected the idea of the Olympics to say, hey, maybe this is a way to kind of solve our differences on the playing field instead of the battlefield. A great intention, nice thought. If that really was the only purpose for the Olympics, then it has failed miserably over the last 150 years that it's been around. But the Olympics are fun to watch. There's other reasons to have the Olympics, but that was one of the primary purposes brought about, was to hopefully bring an end to war. Now, I show this, olives, in the idea that the Greeks, how do I put this? With them, we see this idea of like an international cash crop, something that they grow, yes, for the idea of eating and nourishment, but more so for making money. Olive oil was such a valuable commodity in ancient times and the Greeks had a lot of it, that they were able to make a lot off of this, to where they would have their olive tree orchards primarily for the idea of trading it instead of using it. And last up, art. I show more of a modern statue there, but all of our ideas of how to do modern art, or to get more of a realistic art look, both in paintings and in sculptures, that starts with the ancient Greeks. It doesn't say that they were the best at it, but they were pretty dang good, and we built off of it. We talk a lot more about that when we get into like the Renaissance. So again, these are just a couple things. There's a lot more I could bring up. Talk about just kind of our connections with ancient Greece, and I'll say this a lot, in many ways we copycat the Greeks and Romans the way we want to copycat them, I should say, not the idea of like, let's do it exactly the way they do things. Again, I'll get more examples there later, but we are definitely affected by the ancient Greek world, hence why I make this unit on ancient Greece a bit longer. It helps explain the world around you and I just better. You understand why we do things the way we do, why we have things the way we have, why we say things the way we say them, even just names. there's a lot of influence from ancient Greece within our even modern day society. Now, this is where I like to go over a little bit of geography. At this point, at least for this video, I'm not going to go into the geography, except for just to say a couple things. Like I usually give an assignment out at this point. Like when I talk about the ancient Greek world, or if I say the ancient Aegean world, that is the same thing. It's everything you see there on this map. If you don't know where this is, it's the Eastern Mediterranean world. The Aegean Sea is in the middle. It's basically between Greece and Turkey, if you want to look that up to give more of an idea of where in the world we're looking at. But when you hear, if I ever use the term the Aegean world or the ancient Greek world or just the ancient Greeks, we're talking about this whole area right here where they have this influence. If I say mainland Greece, then I'm talking about, this area, just what we think of as, say, the country of Greece today. But you need to know that idea of like, okay, the Aegean world's everything, mainland Greece is this area. This is Asia Minor over here, also known as Anatolia, but I'll refer to it as Asia Minor. Ionia is this coast right here. That'll come up later when we get into the Persian Wars. And then you definitely need to know, in this lesson here, the island of Crete, where we believe the first early Greek civilization is established in, a civilization called the Minoans. Now, in speaking of these early Greeks, there's two early Greek civilizations that we'll be talking about at least a little bit. You have the Minoans and the Mycenaeans. So the Minoans come around first. Please get those dates down. Again, I'm not going to quiz you on those dates, but please get those dates down because at least you can kind of see how Minoans come first. Mycenaeans come along a little bit afterwards, but then for about a good 500 years, they are the contemporaries of each other. They're neighbors, I guess you could say. And this isn't the best map in the world. You're looking over here, but in your notes, please have this down. Minoans are mostly known as like the island civilization. Crete being their main island, but all the islands of the Aegean Sea. Mycenaeans are known more as the mainland Greek civilization. And between the two, the Minoans are more dominant. The Minoans are more powerful than the Mycenaeans are until the Minoans disappear. And like it says at the bottom, they both disappear mysteriously. There's a lot of theories about this, and anyways, I'll get into this a little bit later, but the Minoans and the Mycenaeans both disappear. The Minoans disappear kind of like they're there and then they're just gone, whereas the Mycenaeans, they kind of filter away over a matter of time and go into a major dark age. Well, again, we'll get to that later. Now, in that last slide, it was talking about that they both have writing styles, but we don't really know how to read them. Every time I look this up, there's always said that there's been progress made on how to read Linear A and Linear B. Linear A, this is an example of Minoan writing. Linear B, an example of Mycenaean writing. I keep waiting for this personally. It's just like, when are we going to have this fully deciphered? And will we ever find the original stories of, say, like from the Greek mythologies? Like, what are those stories really based off of? Did they tell those same stories back in Mycenaean times, like of Hercules and things like that? I shouldn't say Hercules. I should say Heracles if we're talking about the Greek version of it. Zeus and all these stories. Do they have those same stories then? Or were they based, or these tall tales that built up over time during the Greek Dark Age? Again, something we'll get to later, the Greek Dark Age. Anyways, I'm really waiting for this to be translated, for this to be a read language again. And I would really like to see any of these mysteries we could find out about ancient Greek culture and these stories, what was real and what was not real. So at the moment, we just guess. So, again, more on Minoan civilization. We call it the first Greek civilization. Yeah. Anyways, I won't get into that right now. I'll let, say, a college professor go into that one more for you if you ever take a class like this in college. But the Minoans are known as the first Greeks, the very first Greek civilization. Already talked about this, but just get in your notes. Located on the island of Crete, that large island at the bottom of the Aegean Sea. They became very wealthy and powerful and believed to have had a very big navy, as well as a lot of trade. In fact, you remember our lesson from Egypt. This is the time when you have the Middle Kingdom of Egypt coming about, and you see a lot of international trade starting between, say, Egypt and Mesopotamia and Greece, or the Minoans specifically, and they enrich each other that way. So the capital city is a place called Knossos. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a little bit. And then how do we know about these guys? Well, just like a lot of other early civilizations. We do a lot of guessing from the mythological accounts we know of them, and we have a lot of Greek mythology, as well as archaeology that goes into it. And with the Minoans, we actually have a bit more. Something that we have access to or has lasted are frescoes. These are basically paintings done, we believe, during Minoan times that depict Minoan society. And so we try to guess a lot of what their society is like based off of these paintings. One of those paintings being the one you see off to the right-hand side there. And from that one, you can kind of guess that, well, they had boxing. Now, what for? Not sure, but they had boxing. It looks like they even have gloves on. At least one of their hands have a glove on it. So, now, this is where I like to go into the story of the Minoans. Why are they called Minoans? Well, in your notes, you need to have down that they're called Minoans based off of the mythological story of a guy named King Minos, one of the sons of Zeus and Europa. If you know much about this, I just lost my train of thought. Well, one of the things I'd like to do in class is I like to tell this whole story. I'm not going to do it at this point. I'm going back and forth on whether or not I'm going to go into just telling this mythology. Well, I probably will, but I'm not going to do it in this video. We're just going to end the video now, and just this idea of this introduction of the geography of the Aegean world, or the ancient Greek world, as well as the two early civilizations, the Minoans and the Mycenaeans, and I'll explain about the Minoans in the next lesson.